Ladies and gents, welcome to Reconnecting, your video game-oriented talk show. I am Nick Mo, and alongside me, my two wonderful co-hosts. Marshall, you want to take it off?
Yeah, my name is Marshall Brummel. I go by Hangry.
And then my name is Ian Murphy. Screen name is The Pizza Guy. And I am ready to start this off. So, Nick, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to start off with what is perhaps bringing some of the most buzz in the gaming sphere right now. It's the release of Valorant, specifically the closed beta. And if you have not heard of Valorant, I suggest you get out from under your rock because Valorant is taking online streaming and gaming by storm right now because it has recently hit kind of its closed beta. The stream or gamer embargo is lifted, so people are showing off the game. Gameplays on Twitch right now. And as of recently, I think as of yesterday, it shattered some Twitch viewership records. So 12.2 million total hours watched,
Wow.
1.7 million viewers at the peak, which rivals probably another big event, which is the Fortnite Season 2 Black Hole announcement. And there's tons of stuff going on. There's articles coming out every couple hours talking about influences, what's very popular, but there's tons to break down. And I think the best place to start off, let's start streaming specific because Valorant has really gotten a bunch of its steam because of its Twitch momentum. So does anyone want to hop in about that perspective specifically?
Well, I mean, I can tell you right now, I currently have another tab open as we're talking, trying to get a key to Valorant. If that's any indication of how successful this has been for them. And I don't think, are you guys, do you have a tab open trying to get a key right now?
Not right now, but if you'd asked me that 15 minutes ago, that would have been yes for sure.
Yeah, figured. I have one friend who has gotten in. Now we're all jealous and trying to get in. I haven't seen a game do the drop key thing nearly this effective before. I mean, it's everyone's frantic to get a key for this game, and it's Twitch and Riot working together to do that. It's easy money. It's smart.
Honestly, I think the last time we saw something like this was actually Runeterra,
It
Oh
was.
yeah.
which was, again, another Riot title. So it's particularly interesting that this partnership between Twitch and Riot is going so well. Nick, you mentioned the concurrent peak viewers. Guess what? The only concurrent peak viewers that has been higher than for Valorant.
I'm gonna guess that Riot has their fingers in that somehow.
They do. It is the League of Legends World Championship in either 2018 or 2019. I can't remember offhand, but that is the highest peak that any single game has gotten before Valorant.
And with that, I think we've already driven this home, but to reinforce, I will give tons of credit to those beta keys because I think that that's a really smart move on generating the hype because even before we started seeing live action gameplay, we heard lots of hype about this being the CSGO killer, the Overwatch killer, which we can talk about just after this. But the key drop system's really great, not only for generating publicity, but working with content creators, which Riot has also done pretty well historically. So, being able to, I remember I did the Legends of Runeterra beta drop key, and I watched tons of different streamers, whoever was on at the moment, to like learn the game, but also learn about the personalities. So I think it's a really, really smart marketing move on Riot's end, and it will only mean good things for Valorant moving forward.
Definitely. And I mean, the slightly pessimistic view of the world. I mean, it's a good time for them to have all this momentum with everyone being home right now with what's happening in the outside world. It's easy if a game takes the spotlight, it's not a bad time for that company. I mean, they just have so many people at home who would be, out working jobs usually. They're able to kind of invest themselves into this hype as well. And I think that is working for them in this case.
So I want to also bring Marshall in on this next point. I alluded to it just a little bit before, but that Valorant is the CS:GO killer, or the insert game title here killer. Marshall, where do we want to start in that conversation? Because I know for a fact you have a pretty strong stance on that.
Yeah, so I originally come from CS:GO background, like as an esport, and then I moved into Rocket League and have kind of found a home there. I do not think this will kill CS:GO. We've talked about it a little bit as far as how serious FPS players are as far as the realism goes. You know, you, at the top you have stuff like Rainbow Six Siege, which are like, I want to be able to literally blow up floors and shoot you through the floor. And then there's like CSGO, which is a little bit slower, but still pretty tactical. The economy system is very robust and doesn't necessarily hold your hand like Valorant does. You know, so, and then there's also, I think we talked about this a little bit before, but the graphics of Valorant are a little more, I guess I can say it's, you know, Team Fortress 2-esque because it's the same art director. But yeah, I don't think CSGO is going anywhere, given that they just hit a peak viewership concurrency a week ago.
Yeah, that was massive for them, and for the game especially. But Ian, do you want to chime in on that?
Oh, definitely. I think you guys are completely right. The big thing I think CS:GO has that a lot of esports don't have right now is CS:GO has had people who have been invested into that game specifically for decades. I mean, since CS 1. What was it, 1.6?
Even before, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and before that, but like there are this game has spanned decades and people loving it and wanting only that. I think a big thing that's been a talking point in my social circle with Valorant, I think just having characters that have different abilities alone will completely turn off some Counter-Strike purists
Yes.
that will not want to even have that become a part of the game. Counter-Strike isn't going anywhere, but Valorant has made good moves to attract Counter-Strike players, such as very similar, near identical spray patterns in some of the guns, but it won't kill CS:GO.
No.
I
And if I can jump in really quickly, I was trying to play devil's advocate against myself here for like a little bit before the show was going on. And I think the one thing that might give Valorant an edge over CSGO is Riot's organization.
Yeah.
So you have a strong franchise-based model that has worked very well for League of Legends, and they've built the relationships with the team owners. You know, so there's lots of power behind Riot and their ecosystem. So if you and when you look at Counter-Strike, they don't have that power behind their ecosystem because their ecosystem is fractured and everyone's fighting each other, right? So people bid on majors against each other, and people are, teams are in the midst of potentially signing exclusive deals with the leagues or with tournament organizers, and so the scene, even though it's much older, won't feel as mature as if Riot was to just introduce a franchised league in that aspect. So I definitely think that there is room for people who don't want to spend lots of time trying to learn the narratives of CSGO. Valorant will have very easy narratives for them.
And so I think we'll shift the conversation to talk about competitive Valorant, which has been again a big topic of conversation. But I will chime in on one thing in terms of the CS:GO killer aspect. I believe, especially as a spectator, where I've played CS:GO, but I'm much more of a spectator of the competitive scene myself. There are certain games in the esports world right now that I firmly believe are grandfathered in. I think CS:GO, arena-based MOBAs like League and Dota. I'd say even Call of Duty or Rocket League to an extent. Rocket League's becoming, I'd say, something that will become standard, in my belief. And I think that it's difficult to, knock off someone who's grandfathered in like that. So Valorant might take up its own space as kind of this hybrid between Overwatch and CS:GO. But I do think that, premier games will reign supreme. But like you said, Marshall, Riot has a really robust strategy. It's handled League of Legends incredibly well, especially both from a player and spectator standpoint, which makes the competitive scene so great. And I
Arguably
can,
better than anyone else.
I think hands
Mhm.
down. I think they really do set the bar, and if they apply that to Valorant, I can see it having a home. But I don't think it's going to be stealing players or viewers from other big events. If anything, there's going to be some cross pollination, but I don't think it's going to be like CS:GO can finally be put to bed because Valorant is here.
Now, the other thing we have to remember too, especially because I'm involved with the collegiate esports scene. I coach at Aquinas Esports here in Michigan. The one big thing is that a lot of administrators don't like CS:GO. They don't like the terrorists versus counter-terrorists. They don't like the bomb. There's lots of things that they don't like about it. But Valorant solves actually a lot of those issues, right? It's attacker versus defender. It's a spike. It's not a bomb, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more cartoony. There's no blood, compared to CS:GO. So if you're looking at like what games are going to be played by the youth of the future, it's probably going to lean more towards Valorant and less towards CS:GO.
And I so I'm going to chime in on one thing. I know you guys mentioned it earlier, and you brought it up again. The graphics here. You said that you were I'm take it or leave it, honestly. I'm just gonna put it out there right now. I don't find the graphics necessarily appealing. I love how League of Legends graphically can be toned down to be played on like anything, right? I have an old laptop I use to play it, and if my desktop died on me, God forbid, I'd be able to use my laptop to play the game at a lower graphical setting. But the ceiling is so high, right? And because Riot loves the storytelling and adding depth and so much flavor to their game, I see this as a missed opportunity, but I do like how the simple graphics allow for this, it to be a little bit more spectator friendly. It runs a little bit easier. And again, that makes it very accessible. I think that bodes well for the competitive scene more than people really realize.
Part of me thinks that the reason we're seeing a game that looks so simple, I think they are learning from maybe the mistake that Overwatch made in being a very hard to follow competitive game.
I'm nodding
Uh,
my head emphatically right now.
yes, I think it's them overreacting to a problem that's very apparent in esports right now. Overwatch being the figurehead of that. And part of me wonders who will be the most upset about this. I definitely see CS:GO people who just like the way that game is and looks being upset, but also there are people who still play Counter Strike in a 4:3 aspect ratio.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
I don't think some people I don't think care what the game looks like as long as it feels right for them. And I mean, at least they have. I mean, CS:GO players are definitely the ones who will advantage most from this new game and their prior experience playing games. I mean, this game plays a lot. It's very gun skill heavy, and that's CS:GO in a nutshell.
Well, I mean,
I
if you look
Yeah.
at what Valorant tries to do, you talked about overreacting to problems. That
Yeah.
is like Valorant in a nutshell from what I've seen so far, right?
Hmm.
So, asking your teammates for drops is difficult in CS:GO. So, what did they do? They added a ping system so that people can literally just put it right into your inventory, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. CS:GO has this issue right now with like different operator skins. Some of them are almost impossible to see in certain places. So what did Valorant do? Everybody's very visible on the map. Nobody can just sit in a corner and you can't see them, right? So it feels like, you brought up the Overwatch, the viewability aspect of it. Valorant has seemed to done a very good job of taking problems and targeting them, but when you take a bunch of problems and mash the solutions together, does that create something that lasts?
And that's going to be my closing question for each of you guys. In a way, in 10 seconds or less, we're going to start with you, Marshall, and then move to Ian. Uh, do you think so the hype right now is sky high? Do you think that Riot will be able to ride this wave and secure Valorant as a premier, not only just esports game, but like a household video game, just like your Call of Duties, your League of Legends, your Rocket, stuff like that? Marshall, you want to take it?
I'm gonna break this into two parts. I'm gonna break it into a 1 to 3 year and then a 3 to 10. 1 to 3 years, no, it'll sit at the same spot as like an Apex Legends, in my opinion. People
Okay.
will like it. Lots of people will play it, but we just don't even know what the scene looks like right now. Where are pros going to leave from to play this? Like how are new pros going to come up? And then you talk 3 to 10 years, 100%, it'll be League of Legends level.
Great. And then Ian, 10 seconds, give or take.
I think that it's really going to depend on how the CSGO community integrates into Valorant. I think right now the big thing they need to figure out, I think they need to not flood the game with too many characters with far too many differing abilities. I think if they do that and they get even a percentage of the CSGO community that will be very skilled at this game, if they allow themselves to be, if they can get them to stick and create just a big competitive hype, I could see it sticking around for a while.
I'll throw my 10 cents there, or I guess my 1 cent and 10 seconds there before we move on. Uh, I haven't been hands-on with it, and the biggest factor for me is, does the game play well? And it seems like the resounding opinion right now is, yeah, it plays pretty well, and it is improving upon some of the issues of the past. So I think that if it can continue to attract players, everything else will follow suit. But for that, we will only see when more people get their hands on it. But moving down the Riot train here, Riot announced that its LCS Spring Finals, or the Spring Split, will be on ESPN. They just aired today, 100 Thieves versus TSM, today, which is April 8th. And they're airing the rest of the Spring Split, not just on the app, but on ESPN2, so live on DirecTV, which makes ESPN the official broadcaster of the Spring Split. And this is just kind of like the next step for ESPN over this kind of quarantine coronavirus period. They've been airing video games and esports like Apex Legends, NBA 2K, Rocket League, but this is kind of airing like one big league very publicly, and it's a big deal, especially because Riot has been pretty Twitch exclusive prior. So I'll open the floor there. But I guess the prodding question for me is this move substantial, and will more come from it? Ian, do you want to take it first this time?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I think this is definitely significant. If I was reading the notes right, I believe we have 5 televised League of Legends events right on ESPN2, which is still, I mean, a widely available channel. I think this only can be good for League of Legends. I'm just really wondering how networks are going to feel about keeping these resources around once sports are back in full swing. One thing I've been thinking about is there's kind of this like tottering idea that coronavirus could come back. So I wonder if networks will think, what if another, sweep of this happens, world goes on shutdown again, and we need esports. I don't think they'd want to sever those ties. That's obviously worst case scenario, but I think big companies think in worst case scenarios. So I think they will keep this around because I think this has kind of put them in a situation where they realize they need a backup if everything drops from their network.
And I think that it also rides on the tails that as unfortunate as this public health crisis is, it's been absolutely massive for gaming. Not only sales with games like Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal, but esports specifically. And seeing Valorant have the hype on Twitch, and now Riot is taking its LCS league, which again I would say is one of the premier esports leagues out there right now in terms of how it's managed and broadcasted, and taking it to main TV. I think it's significant alongside all the other games that ESPN is showing. But to have ESPN be the sole provider of the spring split is very much substantial. I think it really is a testament to what role will esports play in public viewing. I mean, I predict that if this goes well, if people are tuning into events like this, it could take the place when there's no sports on TV. I mean, when you're picturing things late in the morning or early in the morning, I would say, maybe between large games or events. I mean, hosting events like that would really drive viewership that historically has only been online. Marshall, do you have something to say on that?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned this before, but League of Legends, ESPN a day or two ago, played last year's Rocket League finals, also on ESPN2, and ESPN has been posturing for a while to do things like this, like with their ESPN eSports Twitter and their website, and the team that does that, like Jacob Wolf and people. It's League of Legends worries me being on ESPN, because if I'm new to esports and I turn on League of Legends and I'm in the middle of a team fight, that is so disorienting. It's a lot of things happening at once. So is this good for esports? Yes, because the people who control the media networks are acknowledging it. Is this good for casual viewership? Maybe not.
I could see
with
it
with a
being,
huge
yeah.
question mark at the end there.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I want this to be good, but it's also like I know I was new to League at one point, and I looked at it and I went, "What the hell is going on?"
Yep.
And I feel like a lot of people are going to do that, and they're going to switch the channel and go, "Wow, esports is stupid."
And I've been following the LCS since like season 2 or 3, so since its infancy, and I am excited to see how the casters will maybe change the broadcast to be
Mm-hmm.
more, entry level oriented. Because well, this is a huge step for esports legitimacy overall. I mean, games like Rocket League, NBA 2K that they've aired previously are really easy to spectate and follow around. I mean, you're playing car soccer, you're
Mm-hmm.
playing basketball, you're playing football. If you're watching any of the Madden games. But League of Legends is its own realm, right? So being able to have broadcasters and broadcast teams break that down, I think will take what is a complex game in League of Legends, which has a high skill cap, and make it accessible for all kinds of viewers. And I think if they do that, they've struck gold.
And I think what you have to look at is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it could be upwards of 5 years ago. I can't remember at this point, but TBS had an exclusive deal with Counter Strike. Yeah, and they aired a Counter Strike League on TBS and got massive amounts of viewership. And watching that as a Counter Strike fan was really tough because the casters, were always saying like, you guys know the classic op, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows it, but they don't call it the op anymore. They're very explicit. It's the AWP, and then they'd refer to it as the big green gun, right? So, but that's how new viewers are associating everything, right? So, while that was like painful for old viewers, it was awesome for new viewers, and I could understand that, and they had lots of mini like tutorial-esque things to help people understand what was going on in the game. So hopefully the people at Riot and ESPN can take a page out of Valve and TBS's book and hopefully present it well to their viewers.
And then Ian, you want to wrap this up? I feel like you probably have at least one other thing to share.
Oh, yep. That's a great guess, Nick. I do. I think this will actually be a great time. League of Legends is just so big. When I look at my own friends list on League of Legends, the span and diversity of types of human beings I have on my own friends list from every walk of life is pretty impressive. And I think that at this point in 2020, there is more cross viewership between ESPN and League of Legends tournaments than society might expect. I think 20, 30 something, still everyone in America watches football. Every type of person. I think there are going to be people that are celebrating that League of Legends is on ESPN. I think they will go to that network and they will watch it and make a point like, look how cool it is that the game I play is on the network where I usually am watching all of my sports teams. I think that this still, I am adhering to the caution that Marshall is talking about with, it's going to be weird for the most casual of ESPN viewer to walk into a League of Legends game. But I think ESPN will be happy with the numbers that they get. So I'm interested to see how this all works out.
I think the only thing I will share before we move on is this kind of makes Twitch look at Riot, a little questionable too. Now that there are other streaming platforms in the game that have some interest in, professional esports. I personally think that where Mixer kind of fell apart is that it focused on personalities rather than esports as well. They figured that if we can grab big names like Ninja and stuff like that, we'd be able to stay afloat. But when people are watching, games every weekend, the LCS goes on for several hours every Saturday, Sunday. They're going to want to come back to the same place. And if other streaming platforms can secure opportunities like that, and then, maybe talent follows, I think that could be a better entryway than securing, a Ninja from Mixer. So,
yeah,
that's where I'm going to close the book on that, and we'll scuttle over to our last point here. Legends of Runeterra, which is Riot's card game, formally announced is releasing on April 30th, but not just on PC where the beta was, also on mobile. So I'll throw it out there. I was the one who did propose this topic because I am nerding out for sure. I have a history of playing some collegiate Hearthstone. Through their series, I've been following card games all my life. And when you have Riot developing a card game, I mean, it's the same reaction to Valorant. You know, Riot's making an FPS, a tactical FPS. Now they're making a card
killer.
Game. Oh, please. That's on my list of things to touch. And you know what? I'll start there. It's not going to be that way. I'm telling you right now, because Legends of Runeterra is coming in at a very tumultuous time for digital card games. So Hearthstone, if you have been following the news, released a new expansion, which has pushed it into the Year of the Phoenix, which is like one of its competitive seasons or one of its seasons. It has released its first new class for the first time since its inception, which are overall huge changes for people playing the game, and they've really focused on player-first models and experiences. Magic Arena has been absurdly popular, but I mean that's the go-to game if you're a Magic player, like the physical card game player, and it's a very exciting time for digital card game players. Will Legends of Runeterra be able to stick in that place? Marshall, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll be honest. When they announced that Runeterra released, I looked at my game and I went, "Oh yeah, this was beta." And I don't know how, when I look at how people talk about Runeterra, they talk about it in terms of wanting to get lore out of that game to apply to Riot's League of Legends ecosystem. So when I look at Runeterra, I look at it as a necessary slot for Riot as they move towards being like the Blizzard of old. But what I don't see Runeterra is a game that kills anything.
And I think it's kind of interesting to look at the dynamic Runeterra has in that regard to what Hearthstone has. Hearthstone had the exact opposite of that scenario. Warcraft had been a thing for decades before Hearthstone came out. It had a lot of lore that is very established. There are cinematics that explore that lore. There are books that explore that lore. And I think League of Legends has not nearly made as accessible, glamorous access points for people to make their way into those stories. And
well,
I think not yet. And I think that's why people are, like you said, looking to the card game when Hearthstone had the opposite problem. They had a world to build on, and the cards can just reflect that world. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how those two games compare in that regard. They almost have complete opposite expectations.
And when we're looking at, let's say, pros and cons of their entryway into this genre of gaming, I will say Hearthstone has historically probably been on top in terms of digital exclusive card games. Hearthstone did mobile extremely well, where a huge chunk of their players are mobile, including myself at times. They've made it very friendly, accessible. Magic Arena has proven that physical card games can move online. I believe Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. I don't follow it very closely, but I know it's made the switch, and it's sufficed for some people.
Still gets good viewership.
Yeah, and when you're looking at online exclusive games, the last big game that tried to make a splash in the scene was Artifact. And have you heard of Artifact since?
I've never heard of Artifact.
Exactly. It was Valve's killer for Hearthstone as a card game, right?
And see, that's like, if we can go right back to CSGO really quickly, I think that one thing that Valorant might actually have over CSGO is the fact that it's part of this ecosystem, and Runeterra contributes to this ecosystem, right? Whereas if people want to find lore and whatnot, that drives people to this place. So
go ahead, Ian.
I if you have more to add to that point, I think I was kind of about to branch off in a different direction, so I'm more than happy to let you say what you were going to say.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap up some stuff and give you lots of stuff to play with.
Okay.
I will say, again, Hearthstone's the big dog, but their competitive scene is really lacking right now. So viewership has declined, both at the competitive and collegiate scene, in my opinion. And from what I've seen personally and anecdotally.
No, that's true. I've looked at the stats.
And then
since YouTube Switch.
And when you look at kind of the pros, I'll say that Riot has done storytelling incredibly well. And if Runeterra is going to be strongly rooted in that storytelling, I think that there's an advantage there. And I think that there's a market for people that might be interested in Runeterra, but when you're making any card game, it's just a very saturated market. So you really have to land all of your shots to make it there.
Yeah. The one thing I want to say, big props to Runeterra on. If you look at the things they are changing as they are approaching the April 30th release,
Yes.
It looks like they are heavily focusing on making it easier to get a deck that's playable and fun to play. That is a big problem. Barrier to entry with Hearthstone is you come in, everyone has these decks that are absolutely swamping you, and you do not have the cards to put together anything competent yet. And sure, you can make budget decks, but I think that's a bit hard to. That's not something that casual players are thinking about. They come in, they see the same 3 decks, absolutely murdering them, and they say, "Hey, I want one of those 3 decks." Then they find out what that would take, and that's discouraging. But the one thing that is a big worry to me with Legends of Runeterra is the Legends system as a whole. I think the cool part, it's kind of the Achilles heel, but also like the cool part of Hearthstone. It has its pros and cons. Is that decks? People end up finding these gimmicks that define decks, and it's not like even the game wanted those gimmicks to be there necessarily. I mean, it's just the competitive scene theory crafts and makes these awesome combinations happen. Legends of Runeterra seems to spell out what that Legends gimmick is, and then you're just kind of picking the cards that can make that gimmick happen the best. And I think that's going to take out some of the enjoyment from people who have really enjoyed Hearthstone throughout the years.
And I'll say that they are doing what they can to attract those, I won't say washed up card game players, but people who don't know what game they want to pick out, right? So by making it easy to grab a more competitive deck, I think that's a massive thing that card players, even physical or online, have dealt with all of their experiences, right? I mean, no matter what card game you play, it's difficult to have a competitive deck right off the bat. But other small things, I mean, I'm going to say I played the beta quite a bit. The storytelling and the art direction is absolutely incredible, whether it be
Phenomenal.
the cinematics. The cinematics on YouTube that drive story, the cards themselves look so crisp, and you can right click to see the full art. It does so much right aesthetically that I think it's going to be a joy to play if you're a card game veteran. But again, if we're looking at competitive or like entry level person, maybe watching a YouTube video, it's going to be really tough to follow along because it doesn't show lots like on the screen visibly when cards are played on the field unless you hover over them. And for spectators, that's going to be really tough to follow along.
Yeah.
I think the YouTube scene will be huge for this game. I mean, Hearthstone. I remember when Hearthstone was in its prime, my YouTube feed was flooded with like Disguised Toast, all of those guys. Like, it was such a big part of what contributed to that game. And I mean, Riot has the fan base to make sure there is a big YouTube community around it. I think that'll be big for the game.
One thing I want to bring up really quickly is when we look at what Riot's MO is when they attack a new genre, is it solve problems, right? So, Nick, you and I both played Hearthstone. One of the biggest issues is you, like, a card had an effect, and you had to remember what that effect was. And you're like, shoot, like, is this going to do what I think it does? With Runeterra, it literally shows you. You right-click it, it shows what card it's going to give you, it shows you what effect is. You can go to that little eye on the left side, and it will show you the total outcome of the rest of the round. Like, there's just so many things that they do. And, we talked about competitive decks, right? Like, I use the standard 4 decks that they give you because I don't know how to build my own deck. And I beat people who build their own decks, right? And
that's big.
Yeah, and it feels really good, too, because I'm like, you think you're good at this game, but you're not. So they solved a lot of the problems that people that played Hearthstone that they had. Now, the one thing that they don't have is those fun combos that you were talking about. But what I will say to that is we're in Runeterra Series 1, right?
Yeah.
If we're releasing cards in like series, we're Series 1. Hearthstone is like Series 83, right? So you can't have those cool combos because we don't have the sample size.
Mm-hmm. And so I'll take it because I want to try and wrap things up here. Uh, I'll touch on a few points. I'll give each of you guys, let's say, 30 seconds to predict the future. So what do you think the next couple months are going to look like for Runeterra as it comes out? And a couple points to throw onto the mix. Runeterra adds more complexity. So they have the kind of the, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, the instance versus sorcery. So fast spells versus slow spells. So you can react.
They have 3 speeds. They have 1 more degree than Magic does.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was hard to learn for me.
Yeah, that's weird. I think that's kind of Yu-Gi-Oh derived. I never played Yu-Gi-Oh, but I know Yu-Gi-Oh has a few different speeds as well. So, but yeah, that's you're right. Yeah.
So Riot is giving players more to play with in terms of a macro level or more technical things that they can do. And then on the flip side, though, the beta's been out for quite a while. You talked about kind of the Hearthstone YouTube feed hype. And I saw a lot of that when the beta first released, but since it's really died down. What's the next couple months look like for you, Marshall? And let's get you in there next.
For Runeterra,
yeah,
no different. I'll be honest. I think that Runeterra is one of those games that found like a little niche of people that it solved a problem for, and I don't think it's going to change much. I think that you have too established of a scene with Magic and Hearthstone, and Runeterra doesn't offer enough that's different and fun and engaging that will take a chunk out of those markets.
Mm-hmm. Ian, what about you?
One thing I could see being interesting is most of the Magic community exists in the real world at at card game shops, at Friday night Magic events, so forth. This coming out on April 30th during shutdown. I mean, I could see. I mean, maybe it grabs some Magic fans that have been craving to play a card game and they haven't been able to go down to the card shop with their friends. Obviously, they have Arena, which has been a big deal for Magic. It finally makes that game playable in an online sense. But it's really going to depend on how much of an audience they can pull, and it's going to be weird to see how much of a fire this spark can ignite.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that Runeterra has going for them is you don't really have to pay for cards. That's the biggest thing.
I think it's gonna allow you to play a lot of different champions. I think it's more, they want us to have 10, 15, 20 decks, kind of like how you play different champs in League. I think they want you to be playing a lot of things, not just one deck you stomp with.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I were to summarize my experience and kind of my prediction, I would say is, as someone who's played tons of Hearthstone, I've played Magic, I've played Yu-Gi-Oh, I've even played a little bit of Pokemon, and I've dabbled with the different card games. Legends of Runeterra feels exciting, but I can see it being intimidating to someone entry level or someone spectating. So I think that amongst certain communities, so amongst the card game community, there could be a lot of hype for it. There could be some initial gameplay. I think it will float. I don't think it's going to sink like Artifact. I think it will have its own community. I think Gwent is one of those games that has a very diehard but small community. I think that it will stay afloat. I do not think it will become like the premier card game. I think Magic, Hearthstone still might hold that throne for at least a little while longer. I do think the hype has died down. But for people who do give it a chance and will spectate, they will be graciously rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, fellas, we've covered quite a bit of ground. We've taken kind of the Riot storm or the Riot train for a ride. And we've covered kind of the 3 big announcements that they've made over the past week or so. Any final thoughts from any of you guys?
It's starting to look like it's Riot's world and we're just living in it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I don't mind that, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that they handle their stuff well. I people have a lot of respect for Riot. I think aside from, the kind of the macro level drama in terms of the business side of thing, but from the gamer perspective, I think that they handle themselves very well, and people are very excited for what's to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, we themed this episode being a Riot themed episode, but I think even if we would have just done the biggest stories in gaming, I mean, they almost have that without even trying. We don't need to make this a Riot episode. This could have just been a gaming episode. They're dominating all of the headlines right now in a time where people are glued to their screens. It's a home run for them on multiple fronts, and I think that's exactly what they wanted with expanding into so many different side projects.
So with that, Riot's taken the lead and run with it. And we've kind of broken that down a little bit. Thank you all for coming, Ian, Marshall. It's always a pleasure. And we will be back on Reconnecting as soon as we can. Thank you so much, y'all.
See you later.
See ya.